Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're finally going to talk about the LUSC book. It finally released yesterday and Cubicle 7 was so kind enough to give me a copy, which was really nice, guys. Thank you so much if you're listening. So what exactly is LUSC? LUSC is a new book for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition, going into a lot of detail about, well, guess what? LUSC. There's lots of hints here and there for loads of different things. I'm going to talk about it in upcoming videos, but today we're going to focus on the Amazons. You see, the Amazons were mentioned and have quite a decent amount of lore dumps in this book. It's a lot of stuff which is already established through older lore. However, the fact is that if it's getting re-cemented, this might bode well for the future, for, say, for example, Total War Warhammer, or even Warhammer the Old World. Because when things get written for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, they need to be approved by Games Workshop as, you know, part of the lore. So, let's just jump right in because there's a lot of things to talk about the Amazons. Now, before anything, who are the Amazons? The Amazons are a race of warrior women that live in LUSC, and really we don't know too much about them. There have been like pushes to bring them into canon every now and then, a lot of different bits of lore. A few White Dwarf supplements even got into it quite heavily, but as with most races in Warhammer Fantasy, this is pretty much just going into the whole Amazon type mythology that we had in South America. Obviously then it's the whole Amazons of the Greeks and so on. Little bits of lore in early days attached them to the lizardmen, and then little bits of lore kind of made them potential allies, sometimes working together, sometimes, well, fighting each other, because there is mention of Amazons wearing skink clothing, as in they skinned some skinks. But we do know that they have their own culture. We know that, yeah, they are relatively known by other places in the Warhammer Fantasy world, mostly as the form of rumors and speculation, and we know that some travelers have even been to the island of the Amazons. This is all really, really cool, and now we're going to jump into the lore that we get in this book so we can discuss it. So let's start off with the legends of the Amazons. Stories of the legendary Amazons, an all-female tribe said to dwell within the jungle depths, have been told since folk from the Old World first arrived in Lustria. In the Old World, the few scholars who purport that Amazons exist tend to claim that these women were outcasts from Skeggi. This theory was recorded in the Journeys to the Dark Heart by the brilliant yet notoriously eccentric scholar of geographic lore at the University of Altdorf, Professor Stillmensch. Stillmensch claimed that after a series of battles around the settlement had decimated the menfolk of Skeggi, a band of their women set sail for the south. They landed on a swampy island in the Amaxon estuary. The ruins of several lizardmen temples remained on the island, and the women inhabited and fortified them. When explorers from the Old World explored the island centuries later, they encountered the descendants of the women of Skeggi. They claimed the women had taken up the worship of lizardmen gods, were able to wield powerful weaponry of arcane manufacture, and had even figured out how to spawn in the manner of skinks. Other, more controversial scholars have written that the Amazons were an entirely separate, yet related species created by the gods for a specific divine purpose. Although this theory is commonly derided by authorities on such matters, regardless, the mythology of the Amazons continues to flourish, and yet tales of vicious warrior women wielding strange weapons of power are told in the drinking dens of the world's ports. So, it doesn't really give us a full type of explanation. There's loads of theories revolving around how the Amazons came to be, and to be honest, I kind of like the idea of them being a creation of the gods, per se. Though just not the gods that they're thinking of, it would most likely be the Old Ones, as we know that the Old Ones did have a hand in shaping humanity and so on, so it could be that they were trying to perfect it with the Amazons. Really curious to see a rumor that the Amazons do spawn in the same manner of skinks, so this would be spawning pools, reproducing asexually. I kind of like the idea of that. Well, it's not even asexual because they don't actually breed. The spawning pools kind of just work. It's like a light switch essentially. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of that. Obviously, we've not really heard too much of men in there. I do believe some older lore said that the Amazons would take away men and have their way at them, which, you know, is kind of like how the Beastmen or the Famir kind of work. But still, it's really, really curious, and we might get some more information in the future if, say, for example, more Lustria-based supplements do come out, which would be great, to be honest. I love the idea of them going away from the old world every now and then. The location of Amazon Island hasn't really changed, and we do get a little bit of lore of that, and it goes as follows. There are several islands of note around the eastern seaboard of Lustria that are of interest to explorers from the old world. There are many more islands on the western seaboard, though they are largely unexplored by human sailors and rumored to be a site of several intense bushfire conflicts between the High Elves of Ulthuan and the Dark Elves of Naggaroth. Where, yeah, I wanted to mention that because it's kind of nice that we still get that fighting ground in that area. This would be, if you've played Warhammer 3, where Rakaf is in Lustria, more or less. Amazon Island is the site of several ruined lizardmen structures. It's protected fiercely by the tribes who live there, and no expedition that is set out to explore the island has returned with charts or artifacts to prove that they have spent time there. The few survivors who do return tell stories that the island is fiercely and jealously guarded by the Amazons who live there, and that these warrior women wield strange weapons and magical powers. So, that is in reference to the fact that we know from older lore, which I assume remains canon, that the Amazons are still using lizardmen tech, lizardmen magics, and so on, because we know that they took over these temple cities. And obviously when it comes to that, some tech is usually left behind. It's still kind of weird that, considering where the island is, that the lizardmen didn't try to take it back, and I wonder why they lost it originally. I'm not sure if that was covered in some other lore, but yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Mind you, seeing the Amazons there and seeing a valuable ally, possibly some part of the Great Plan mentions them, means that they don't have to take it back. It's probably in good hands. And the fact that no explorers have been able to take anything away from that island kind of proves it, doesn't it? We do have a little bit more context, which goes as follows. Islands to the east of Amazon Island, such as Tabasco, yep, lovely name, and Sosibiki, I don't know, maybe that's the lizardman version of Susibaka or something, are uninhabited, though human visitors who try to settle there are often caught up in battles between the Amazons and the lizardmen forces from Laxland. The island of sacrifices, found even further to the east, is so infested with venomous snakes that no humans have settled there. That's obviously a throwback to the real island of snakes, but you can see here that, yeah, certain islands are a bit untouched, and you won't be able to get there, which is quite interesting, as obviously it does mean that the Amazons will strike out outside of their island. A little bit of the diplomacy between the lizardmen and the Amazons is also touched up upon. Lizardmen have a fractious relationship with the Amazons. The feeling is mutual. The Amazons keep lizardmen away from the Shrine of Rig, just as they do Oldworlders. The mage priests do not understand how the Amazons or their goddess fit into their equations, and instruct their vassals to keep away from them. So, this is really, really curious. The fact is, they don't exactly know. There could be some temple cities in Samslan that would be, yeah, no, they're fine, don't worry. But it seems that this might be the majority of San not understanding what is happening with the Amazons, what part they have in the Great Plan, will they serve a purpose or not, are they chaos, are they order, and the fact that there is likely very open hostility should they try to get to the Shrine of Rig. Rig is their goddess, by the way, we'll talk about that in just a little second, is honestly something that I'd like to know more about. So Rig's name has been commonly known throughout the Old Ones. In fact, they are worshipped as a Old One. You can see it in the Old One pantheon here, where we've got quite a few ones like Potek and, Sotul, Uxmax. But Rig is known as the Outcast, interestingly enough, possibly having their own vision. So we do have a little bit of the depiction. So depicted as a tall humanoid female figure, Rig has a shrine on an island in the Amaxon, where the Amazons dwell and worship her as Mother of Caliph. The lizardmen do not venerate Rig and are wary of her devotees. Again, something very curious. Why would it be considered a old one, yet not venerated by the lizardmen? Further going into the idea that this is an outcasted version of the old ones. It could be an old one that might have been slightly corrupted by chaos. There's a reason to believe that when we start talking about Koresh in another video. Yeah, trust me, there's something quite interesting here. But Yeah, I don't know. This always is something really important to discuss. Theory crafting, I'd say, is very important with Warhammer Fantasy. Despite 40 years of lore, we still are lacking in loads of areas. And to the best of my memory, I do not believe we've ever seen a corrupted old one. It might have been something in 40k, or something that we might see in the future. I don't know. I don't know if it's corrupted, more so renegade? I don't know. Now, there's a few more bits and bobs which are just kind of minor mentions, just repeating what we read out through the book, which, by the way, the book is out now. You should totally buy it if you like Lizardmen lore and just a lot of lore in general. What a fantastic source book. But it's really nice to see the Amazons return to more recent canon, and I think that's really, really important. Eventually, Warhammer the Old World will touch onto Lustria, so having some context and potentially opening the door for some Amazon minis would be cool, maybe as a sub-faction to the Lizardmen, where you can ally up. For Total War Warhammer, they could work as some sort of mini race, one legendary lord and a bunch of units, and there you go. You never know for the future. Still, I feel fairly hopeful. It's just nice to see stuff back in lore, even if it doesn't make it into the other mediums. Because Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has really been keeping Warhammer Fantasy alive for these years. Cubicle 7 have been doing a fantastic job, and it's just great to see old stuff still being mentioned. But what do you guys think about all this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion.